Generations came through America's enviable system of public higher education at a time when its covenant with society was better understood and more intact than it is today. That bond between public colleges and the American people can be traced all the way back to 1789. John Adams articulated the social compact, that between society and universities, in the Massachusetts Constitution. He said that their very reason for being was to spread the benefits and the opportunities created by higher learning to different social and economic groups, those he called different orders of the people. In other words, educational excellence was never intended solely for the privileged. From the beginning, public higher education in America was intended to minimize the accidental circumstances that would otherwise determine a young person's fate. Today, that social compact is fractured. Today, tuition and fees have skyrocketed. At $1.4 trillion, student debt in this country exceeds credit card debt. And 40% of the 22 million Americans with loans aren't paying them back. As Ramsey said, my higher education odyssey began in the fall of 1979 when I began my studies at UVA. 2 degrees later, I was ready to take my first steps in the world of business and build on what my father's own affordable higher education had allowed him to create. I served on several statewide boards and commissions, and it was those responsibilities that deepened my understanding of John Adams' social compact and the critical role public colleges play in the prosperity of the state. I was fortunate. My initiation to public higher education governance was through the lens of the entire Commonwealth. In particular, my service on the State Council of Higher Education and our work at the time developing college performance measures gave me a broad view. Through no fault of their own, most college governing board appointees are barely exposed to statewide policies or goals. Understandably, they see through the lens of just a single institution and its particular agenda. So I felt lucky. As we all know, the early 2000s were a dynamic time for industry across our country, and higher education was no exception. Beneath the surface images of idyllic college campuses and iconic buildings, the same forces that would ultimately undermine the American economy would drag higher education to the crossroads as well. I know because I belong to an industry that lived through it. As most of you will remember, the crisis of 2008 wiped out 25% of America's household wealth, and our country's financial institutions were shaken to their very core. But we were also coming to recognize the growing power of technology at the time. Back then, Facebook was just starting up. It had 6 million users in 2005, double that in 2006, and by the time I was appointed to UVA's governing board just 2 years later, it had tenfold that number. Today, there are 1.6 billion active users. The internet has also made the world super connected and inextricably codependent. Concepts that were alien just a few years ago are connections we now depend on every day. As Tom Friedman said, and I quote, 10 years ago, Facebook didn't exist, LinkedIn was a prison, Skype was a typo, Twitter was a sound, the cloud was still in the sky, Big Data was a rap star, 4G was a parking place, and an application was what you sent to college. Given such momentous changes, a failure to adapt meant a failure to survive. Standing still meant, and still means, falling behind. The impact on many businesses is well known. But was higher education immune? Absolutely not. Nationally, the fractured social compact had opened the door for what Rich DeMillo of Georgia Tech's Center for 21st Century Universities calls a small band of innovators. And their ideas and vision burst onto the national scene in 2011 and 2012. Not surprisingly, the DeMillo Band started with the elite of the elites. Leading the way was MIT's former president, Charles Vest, who announced he would make the materials for nearly all of MIT's courses freely available on the internet. Harvard jumped on board in a partnership. Stanford University professors who had been working to make lectures less boring and technology more relevant used their research to open Stanford's courses to the world. Overwhelmed, they capped enrollment at 160,000 students in their first offering. Today, their creation, Coursera, offers over 2,000 courses from prominent institutions to over 24 million registered users. A fascinating example is the endeavor of an Indian immigrant named Salman Khan. Khan took a free drawing program and used it to help his cousins learn mathematics. This gave rise to what is now the Khan Academy. It has its own YouTube channel that anyone can access. It's free, has videos in 39 languages, and offers over 10,000 short courses, all accessible on an iPhone. Is it big? It's huge. With almost 3 million subscribers and over 1 billion views, some consider that this extensive reach makes Salman Khan the most relevant man in worldwide education today. All of these innovators were responding to the many changes occurring, and they had only one simple goal: to make education as widely accessible and affordable as possible. But there were other influences as well. Employers were then, and still are, examining the need for a degree versus just a credential. And a huge educational technology industry sprouted to feed the insatiable demand for customizable, affordable, modern higher education. Driving this shift have been worldwide growth estimates of 2.7 billion students by 2035, rapidly accelerating smartphone penetration, and a global workforce crisis created by extreme automation that seems destined to eradicate not only low-skill, but also medium-skill repetitive jobs. Some forecasters even suggested a 17% annual growth rate in the demand for higher education by 2020. In other words, forces from all directions have been building to change institutional benchmarks with no end in sight. So it was on the eve of this era of change that in July of 2008, I returned to Charlottesville as a newly minted member of the university's governing board. I swore my oath of allegiance to the state, was serious about my responsibilities, and took my place at an enormous table in the East Oval Room of the beautiful, historic Rotunda. 2 months later, the Great Recession struck with a fury few foresaw, dealing more than a glancing blow to our economy's economic and financial underpinnings. It even upended the American ethos that our children's future would be brighter than our own. The most casual observer could see that patience and sticking to centuries-old ways of doing things would not be hallmarks of our progress, even within the hallowed halls of the nation's great universities. At UVA, I discovered that things were hardly rosy. The school had not developed a concrete strategic plan in a decade. One report showed that only 8% of its fourth-year students were highly competent in writing. The core arts and sciences faculty was in an uproar over salary levels, and research funding had precipitously declined. Tens of millions in large gifts were directed to projects dearest mostly to the hearts of their sponsoring donors, like squash courts and yoga centers. Enrollment was tilting in favor of kids from out of state, and the percentages of minority and low-income students were among the lowest of any public university in the country. State support, of course, had fallen, and the university was becoming ever more reliant on an unsustainable, high tuition, high aid model, high financial aid model, rather than the traditional low tuition mandate that should define public universities. The number of ranked medical specialties at UVA's hospital had fallen. Worst of all, patient safety metrics were not to be envied. Unfortunately, there wasn't a high-level administrative focus on tackling these thorny challenges, despite written guidance, repeated urging, and offers of support from the board. The administration's refusal to address these matters led to the period in 2012 when protests and outrage were directed at the Board of Visitors and over the requested resignation of the president. Tonight, I'd like to set the record straight about how that actually happened. At UVA and elsewhere, personnel matters have always been handled delicately. Most think it better to extend a quiet courtesy rather than create a public embarrassment over a sensitive employment matter. It happens all the time, and it had long been the genteel norm in Charlottesville. Typically, no one would have batted an eyelash. In hindsight, we certainly would have done things differently, and I have indeed come to appreciate how important transparency is in the governance of public institutions. But what sprouted on the lawn that summer was no organic uprising. Instead, anyone with a remote amount of influence was encouraged to engage the media, politicians, and influential donors to generate enormous pressure on the board. The Washington Post and the New York Times reported on dozens of such calls. In short order, institutional insiders had set up a war room in the law school. UVA's own fundraising office hired a graduate student to fuel social media and create public comment. The press was provided information that was misleading at best. And there's more. A plane was hired to tow a banner with an insulting message over the Capitol in Richmond, urging my removal. Threatening letters and flyers with no return address were sent to my office. Included were photos of my company's property, and the message was very clear. Shut up and stay home. Just when I thought I had seen everything, I received an email threatening my home and my family on a day when my children